Hi, everyone, and welcome to our MOPSCon presentation about marketing ops and sales ops partners in growth. My name is Veronica, and I currently lead the marketing ops team at Alma. Alma is a US mental health care company connecting therapists to consumers. I sit under the demand gen team, and we are 5 people across 4 time zones. Our small and mighty team is responsible for driving revenue in partnership with Doris's team. And together we are looking after the technology and processes enabling our growth organization. I live in Spain, which means I am fully remote. In fact, Doris and I never met in real life. We only connect in the few hours of time zone overlap. I do love connecting to the international Marketo community. I run 2 Marketo user groups here, one for the Nordic countries and another one for Spain. And last year I was named Marketo champion. When I'm not doing all these things, I spend a lot of time with my family. I go paddle surfing, as you can see in my background, and also traveling. I'll give you another fun fact. Doris and I worked for the same company before, so this is the second time we are working together, and I would love for Doris to introduce herself.
Thanks, Veronica. Hi, everyone. I'm Doris. I'm the Director of Sales Ops here at Alma. I oversee the sales tech stack and help empower decision-making through data management and analytics. Before Alma, I was helping some high-growth companies in the technology and media sectors to improve operational efficiencies across sales, marketing, fulfillment, and finance functions. And that was during my time at PwC, doing consulting at an office management startup and Vision, where I may have overlapped with Veronica. I am Salesforce admin certified and passionate about process improvement. My hobbies include staying active with the bar, as well as playing a lot of board games. It's great to be talking with you all today.
Awesome. So I will start us off with a quote from Forrester on B2B alignment, and I'm sure that this comes as no surprise. Businesses that align their revenue engines grow 12 to 15 times faster than their peers and are 34% more profitable. That's some serious growth, and I think we are in this bucket. Alma is doubling down in number of our member base since last year, and we tripled our number of employees. And what makes it so successful is we believe exactly this revenue engine alignment between marketing and SOPs and the topic of our presentation. The MOPs and SOPs partnerships is likely the most important relationship to build and nurture. We all see the rise of revenue ops in the last few years, and this is for a good reason to solve for this alignment piece. So let's dive into it. At the core of it, MOPs and SOPs have a ton of common ground. We basically focus on the same things. Our systems working well and working in sync, our processes that enable users to make the most of the technology, the data that's coming in and out of our tools, the insights we can draw from this data, and the policies that apply to our business. For example, Alma is operating in the healthcare business, and so we have to be mindful of things like HIPAA compliance and enforce those things in our tools. Now, when we work so well integrated, a small change in CRM, for example, a field type change, can have a domino effect, and we feel that very well in MOPs. And this is why we think this is very important. So let me share the agenda for our session, a deep dive into our working relationship and what we think makes it successful. I will tell you about our collaboration, so how we understand both sides of the business, and then how we plan, prioritize, and support each other. Doris will talk about how we work together to support the growth engine, how we enable the handoffs between marketing, BDRs, and AEs, and also how we align marketing and sales through technology. And Doris will also talk about the numbers and what is our foundation for reliable data and the metrics that matter to our business. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to talk about is understanding both sides of the business. This means learning each other's language. It may sound like a cliche, but SOPs do speak a different language, especially when it comes to CRM. And first things first, begin with knowing the stack. What is sales ops using? For example, are there sales enablement tools, meeting booking tools in the stack? What data do these tools feed into Salesforce? Different fields can have different sources of truth, and having that documented just makes SOPs and MOPs life easier. Next up is discussing the level of access. Should sales ops have access to your marketing automation instance? In Marketo, we have this amazing activity log that makes investigation process much faster. And I know that any sales ops person appreciates that. We actually give Doris access to Marketo so she can dive into this activity log and check what's going on when things are off. And in the same time, should marketing ops have access to Salesforce? I know many of us use the sync user to log in, but that still has limited permissions. In my previous experience, I worked with a very conservative sales ops team who would only give admin privileges to certified folks. And of course, having such a certification makes life easier. One example I could give here is checking the permissions on a field, knowing where to go to do that, understanding the CRM setup. And this enables me to go to Doris with specific pointers to troubleshoot. That saves me a lot of time. That saves Doris a lot of time. And my last point here is in terms of education. Do you have sessions with sales ops to share the different processes? For example, how do you stamp interesting moments? Or how do your forms on your website collect the data? There's a lot of upstream information available in an automation tool that maybe sales ops doesn't even know about. And the other way too, CRM hosts a lot of information from sales or post-sale processes, and this can be very useful to MOPs if access is given. When Doris started in her role, we held weekly sessions where we would dive into the tool and troubleshoot live and try to close tickets this way. And we found out that this brings a lot of value and is something we do to the day on a weekly basis. And I also have a few talking points on a higher level too. For example, how are SOPs and MOPs supporting the revenue goals? At the end of the day, we support the revenue goals, and each project we dedicate time to should be in service of that. So knowing these goals and mapping the tickets and projects to that. And then I had a point about reviewing the results. We are all very busy to get through to the next project and to the next task, but we also need to take the time and look back. This can be done in the format of a monthly business review, where we look at how are our teams performing, understand what happened in sales and marketing during said month. This is also a chance for marketing ops and sales ops to meet with leadership and get feedback on priorities. And then on a high-level alignment, we work in support of sales and marketing organizations, but we do need the support of our leaders. So here are questions like, is our collaboration encouraged and supported? Do our department leaders understand and are aligned on our priorities? My job, for example, is to make sure the leadership is aware how well integrated our functions are And I often use the Marketo and Salesforce sync analogy to describe how marketing ops and sales ops work together. Now let's switch gears and talk about where we spend most of our time, and that's the workload. Again, marketing ops and sales ops have a lot in common in how the workload is shaped. There are the planned projects. So these are items that stem directly from your quarterly planning, things you know are coming and you can put in a roadmap. Then there are the unplanned projects or items coming from the side. For example, we are replacing our CMS next week or our CRM, maybe not. As much as we try to plan and forecast, there will always be new and urgent projects, especially in the startup world where we are trying to maintain that flexibility. This is to say this is okay, as long as there is a process for it, and I will show you how we tackle it. And last, we have the tickets. These are the low effort items, not necessarily tied to a project. For example, a new user starting in CRM or a value update on a pick list field. So how do we handle all of this? And I will start with talking about building a roadmap. Here I try to stay true to our current process, which begins with marketing and sales defining the priorities as departments with the goals tied to the revenue. Where they need help is in reviewing and identifying, sizing the dependencies. It is quite crucial that marketing ops and sales ops is involved in the planning to provide that feedback. And we run this exercise by answering one question: how can we partner to make these projects successful? Do we need a field or do we need an object? Do we need an integration or a formula field is enough? All of these are questions that only us most likely can answer. And these are probably things that leadership is not even aware of. In the same time, there are MOPs and SOPs items that probably leadership does not have on their radar, and that has to be added to the roadmap. For example, I know that Doris wants to look at moving all the workflows to flows in Salesforce. I am focused on database reduction this quarter with an impact on cost. So we're making sure to add these items to the roadmap and also socialize the importance. And then comes the prioritizing. We have a simple 4-quadrant, important, urgent map to identify what is a must-have, what is valuable, or a nice-to-have. I'm actually very fortunate to do this process together with my manager. So we managed to do also triage at this step. All the feedback coming out of these sessions has to go back to the teams. And then the final list goes into a project management tool, like an Asana board, where we all have visibility on progress and workload, and marketing ops and sales ops can collaborate together. In reviewing our workload, we aim to spend about 80% of our time here in planned work. This was not the case maybe a year ago, but we gradually got to this by getting better at planning, forecasting, and also not getting distracted. Now we're going to move on and talk about how we tackle unplanned projects or what doesn't spark joy. You hear about this type of requests in maybe venting channels in some communities. For example, getting hit with a Slack message at 5 p.m. on a Friday to revamp the entire lead lifecycle or nurture programs. We normally keep 20% of our time for projects coming from the side, maybe a dependency or an urgent ask. And as a rule of thumb, we should not be spending more than 1 working day a week for projects like this. We are also using something called a buffer process to identify what projects we will be working on. This is literally a form in our project management tool with fields such as department, what key results this ask is tied to, what are the dependencies and risks and timeline, and what the impact will be. With this information, we have a buffer council, which includes our leadership team. And what we do is we score and decide which buffer projects move forward. And last, when it comes to tickets or small asks to a project, we always work with an intake form. This form, it's again living in our project management tool. It's tied to our marketing ops and sales ops board. And maybe the one reason we love Asana is because we can mirror the tickets while we both work on it. So it stays as a single source of truth. We do hold triage calls to make sure we work the ask in the same time, especially when there is a dependency. Another point I wanted to bring today is to create SLAs for most of the repetitive tasks and always factor in sales ops time. In my case, I noticed that 70% of the requests for marketing ops do have a sales ops dependency. And let's look at how the SLAs can look like. Here we see some examples such as list import, a few Marketo programs, forms, and fields. And you can see that in the consideration column, almost all, if not all, have a CRM component. And this is something the team requesting has to be mindful about. We have things like Salesforce campaigns, Salesforce statuses, syncing to CRM or not, which lifecycle stage to sync to, and so on. And with this, we talked about understanding both sides of the business. So I will pass it on to Doris with more insights.
Thanks, Veronica. Together, we fuel the growth engine. And what we do is at MOPs and SOPs, we have a collective goal to create the conditions to grow revenue more efficiently and more effectively. And we do this by pulling on people, process, and technology levers. Veronica covered how we do this on the people side with the collaboration and the alignment across teams. I'm going to focus more on the process and technology levers. So we'll talk about the process lever first. I don't need to tell this audience, but there's a lot of processes between sales and marketing, and those processes have a lot of interdependencies and overlap. So how do we split up all of the growth processes? One thing that we do is that instead of defining the roles and responsibilities by process, we organize by technology. If we are organized by process, we will need to be a lot more diligent in documenting and defining the roles and responsibilities for every process, every new process, and every project that we may come across. At a growing company like Alma, we introduce new processes and projects on a very, very frequent basis. So we need something more scalable as to how we organize. So organizing by technology, this allows us to already have a blueprint of who is doing what. And you can imagine that is especially helpful when there's a new process or project. With a clear understanding of the responsibilities, there's less confusion and less things that fall through the cracks. So to illustrate, let's take an example process on the left-hand side. When there's one team impacted, it's simple. So let's take an example where there's co-ownership. An example that we'll use is MQL routing. Here, both SOPs and MOPs are involved to ensure that only qualified marketing leads get assigned to a sales rep. There's a few steps to that process, as we can see on the right-hand side, starting from a prospect filling out an ad form as an example. The prospect is then created, labeled as an MQL, and then round robin to a BDR, or it may just go directly to an AE. Then by organizing that with the technology that we use, it's clear who is the owner for each of the process steps. Prospect creation happens in Marketo, so that's the MOP ownership. The criteria for a lead status to be updated to a marketing qualified lead happens in Marketo, so MOPS owns that. The round robin to an inbound BDR is done in Salesforce, so SOPs owns that. And then we may assign things directly to an AE, and that's done through Chili Piper, so SOPs owns this. So together, there's a lot of interdependencies for MOPs and SOPs, and we often work together. Next slide. Thanks, Sarah. We start off new projects with scenario mapping. This helps us ensure that whatever design that we land on covers the common scenarios, and we take a decision on any exception scenarios. Do we design for it or do we not? Then we pay extra close attention to handoffs. We hate bad handoffs because it may result in revenue leakage and inefficiencies. So we try to eliminate handoffs where possible. And if not, we try to ensure that those handoffs are smooth and information is passed from one to another during the design process. Then in general, we think about scale a lot. Should we spend that upfront investment to create a more automated and more streamlined process? As the enablers and the builders, we have to weigh the effort to build with the potential impact of any new build. Then by working together on all of these, there's better solutioning. We're bringing the full marketing and tech stack together to design a solution, and that results in less hacky solutions, less tech debt to solve team-specific needs. We also have better and more informed trade-offs. Because we have that good collaboration, there's representation from both marketing and sales, and that allows us to make more comprehensive trade-off decisions. Like, should we decide to design for certain exception scenarios that impact one team more heavily? Lastly, there's also quicker implementation. This comes naturally with clear understanding of roles and responsibilities and having a good solution to start the build. On the next slide, on this slide, we'll cover off some of our favorite tips. First, collaborate on one project management tool. As Veronica mentioned, we use Asana. We use Asana across the whole company, and it has been instrumental in fostering good cross-functional collaboration. We also do a lot of process mapping. This helps us identify the systems impacted, the handoffs, the manual and automated steps, and the different scenarios resulting from decision points. And this is critical as a first step for good solution design. Last tip, we create templates. For example, we have a marketing campaign production template. We took some learnings from the past campaigns to create a checklist or a template to ensure that every new campaign is designed well and has thought through all the key components. And this template includes dependencies on other teams, process review checks, success metrics. And this has been really helpful in reducing any unwanted surprises at campaign launch. Now we'll switch gears and talk about technology. Technology is our favorite lever. Our approach at Alma is that we use the best-in-class tools and consolidate where it makes sense. So I don't force everyone to use Salesforce. That will lead to so many hacky solutions to solve specific business problems. We do have to be mindful that by taking this approach where we may result in a larger tech stack, but we prefer this because we're able to move faster, be more effective, and to innovate. So how do we handle a large tech stack? Integrations are key here. When introducing a new tool, we try to select tools with out-of-the-box integrations, and we prefer a direct integration. If needed, we will use an integrator. It could be a lot of work upfront to set it up, but it will unlock so many benefits. More features, data consistency, data accessibility, and better process streamlining by connecting the tools. Let's talk about specifically how we are involved in the technology process. So we're involved in the whole life cycle of the tool, starting from vendor selection. MOPs and SOPs are involved to evaluate new tools, and we look at the integration options, do high-level solutioning to ensure that the intended use cases that the tool is meant to solve are met. For example, we were brought in to decide on a community tool, which will be used to engage our members. We evaluated the integration capabilities across the various tools, and that was reviewed as an input in the decision-making process. Then during tool implementation, we design with the full tech stack in mind. Taking the same example with the community tool, one of the use cases that we wanted to solve for was to email a member if they have not logged in to the community tool. Given the integration options, the decision was made to first sync data with Salesforce and then use Marketo to send emails. We were able to represent both the marketing and sales team so that we're able to ensure that there will be a smooth implementation for both teams. Lastly, there's this post-tool implementation. There is a period of hypercare where we have to pay extra close attention to any potential issues. And together, what we do is that we over-communicate to our stakeholders of any changes and monitor and resolve issues in a collaborative way. The benefits of us working together in sync throughout these situations are that there's a better tool evaluation. We're considering both the sales and marketing workflows. There's less hacky solutions. We're considering the full tech stack to solve a problem. Lastly, we have smoother implementation that's coupled with comprehensive monitoring post-launch, since we are monitoring the whole entire growth engine. Let's move on to the last section. In this next section, we're going to talk about data. At the end of the day, it's all about the numbers. The numbers are how we talk in the same language and stay aligned on the company's goal. Before we go into detail, I want to spend a minute or so on some prerequisites to be set up for success. It's important to align on the metrics definitions. What's the key metric? What is not, and how to calculate that metric. Easier said than done, but here are some tips from setting OKRs, KPIs, and goals for other companies. First, don't overcomplicate it. If it's not digestible, then adoption will be low. Also, with more components to the metric, there's more ways to game a metric, and that's not productive at all. Next is to be consistent. We rarely try to change definitions because that will allow for better historical reporting and trend analysis. Lastly, don't sweat it if it's not comprehensive or perfect. For example, I think one hot topic is attribution. There's so many ways to do this. If first touch works efficiently, go with it. Yes, someone may enter a paid channel and then come back 1 year later if they re-engage to a referral, but these are a minority of cases in our situation. We then try to coach stakeholders on like the pros and the limitations of the metric so that we're all aligned on the pros and cons of that. Moving on to the next slide. Here you can see that MOPs and SOPs, we own the entire data in the sales funnel. And this is what we care the most about within our growth team. For us, that's the path from a lead to executing a contract with the mental health provider. And we work together to own and maintain this data. So for example, we both own lead data. MOPs mainly manages our inbound lead data and SOPs manages our outbound lead data. MQLs are owned by MOPs, and then opportunity management is owned by Ops. Given the importance of these metrics, we have to work together to maintain and ensure that the foundation of the data is good. So how do we maintain that data? So we do this by providing reliable data, enabling access to that data, and being the data gurus to advise our teams on the metrics that matter. And by working together, we're able to have less data reconciliation. At Alma, we have done this very infrequently compared to some of my past experiences. Our month-end reporting process is able to be done in a quite seamlessly. There's also faster troubleshooting, and lastly, more comprehensive data analysis since we're considering the full funnel. Moving on to reliable data. Data hygiene is critical for reliable data. We do this through various actions that you all are familiar with. We want to double click on issue monitoring. Because we have the understanding and also accessibility on both marketing and sales data, we're able to identify the root cause and troubleshoot much quicker. When we come across an issue, we each do some light troubleshooting to be better able to communicate the issue to each other and get to the root cause quicker. It's been amazing to have Veronica familiar with Salesforce, and I also dabble in Marketo. So we're able to investigate and go into each other's tools to help pinpoint that issue. We work hard together on this to provide trustworthy data to help drive those data decision-making. And Alma is so big on data, so we try to empower the teams with data accessibilities. Our philosophy is that the sales funnel should be easily accessible through one tool. More hurdles to access the data means less adoption. We want everyone to have this data so that they're thinking more holistically and so that they're able to be more aligned with the main goal, which is to drive more revenue. I have a past experience where the marketing team was focused on growing MQLs because that was their key metric. And sometimes it was at the expense of quality. At Alma, our marketing team monitors the MQL volume and has the MQL volume goal, but they also really care about how they convert. It's okay for them to miss the MQL target goal if quality is getting better and we end up still converting more deals. I think that muscle to review metrics more holistically and with greater alignment with the company goal starts at providing that insight to the full revenue team. The MOPs and SOPs team, because we are on the forefront of data and new revenue initiatives, we are in a position to advise on metrics that matter. We do this by guiding the teams by asking, do you have success metrics upfront? Are these measurable? Do we have the infrastructure to report on this, or do we need to build that infrastructure? Is your metric controllable and also correlated with business performance? With better understanding and use of data and the associated metrics with that, we're able to align our stakeholders, especially cross-functional ones, because at the end of the day, it's all about the numbers, and the numbers are how we communicate. That's all for me. I'll pass it off to Veronica to conclude.
Thank you, Doris, for sharing all the good stuff on technology and processes. We talked about a lot of things today and the benefits of a good working relationship between marketing ops and sales ops. We are going to open for Q&A shortly, and I want to leave you with some takeaways from our session. First off is making an intentional effort to understand both sides by getting familiar with sales tools and sales processes, learning how to troubleshoot in CRM. You can choose to become CRM certified or choose to take some courses that will help you. And last is working from the same tool for collaboration and handoff when managing projects. Planning and prioritizing your workload together. Here, we talked about documenting the process for all incoming projects, all tasks, whether it's planned, unplanned, or small tasks. And try to aim for an 80 to 20 balance, and maybe use a buffer form if you have a lot of unplanned requests. Also, we talked about getting in early on the planning and doing working sessions together to identify dependencies, agree on the level of effort, and communicate that back to your team. In terms of service level agreement, you can do that on a lot of things you're working on in Marketo, and I share some example how to bake in sales ops time for any of the marketing ops tasks. Doris talked about aligning the sales and marketing teams through technology, and we do this by looking at the tech stack ownership by tool versus process. We also talked about partnering on each tool evaluation process to identify how introducing a new tool changes existing processes and what data a new tool can provide. And then, of course, we all know avoiding hacky solutions and creating technical debt is not something we are intentional about. So it goes without saying to avoid band-aid solutions. And last, we are the ones supporting the analytics framework, and we do that by aligning on definitions and what are the key metrics we measure. We do working sessions on data quality, such as deduping and regular database cleanups. And in terms of data accessibility for your teams, make sure we look at the same report and source and decide together what tool we go to. And with this, we thank you for bearing with us throughout this presentation. And now we're going to open for Q&A.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us until the end. A few great questions came in the chat, so I would love to start the conversation. I will pick the first question here. Do you have a roadmap template or example? This is a great question from Lindsay. We actually work with the Eisenhower matrix for MOPs. So this is the urgent, important matrix. I was looking for an example. I just found a blog post, so I'll just put that in the chat if I can maybe ping the team. So this is, maybe you saw it before, is the urgent, important. We gather all the asks from all the teams, and then we do a planning session where we use our managers to drop the different items in there. So I can give you a few examples. For the urgent and important, these are like must-haves items. For example, for us is geographic expansion, because at Alma, we're still going through that. So this is no question, we have to do it. Marketing ops, sales ops is leading that expansions. So we need to make the changes in our systems to allow the processing of records coming from new states. And then we have the not urgent and important. So we call these valuable items. Here, almost always I put documentation because I want to make sure it's a goal for my team. However, it's not urgent. So whenever we're not working on must-haves, I would go in and make sure I update our documentation. So by the end of the quarter, I have, you know, the most up-to-date information. Then there's the urgent but less important. And those are like nice to have things. For example, a new integration could be there. Most recently, we look into Chili Piper and Marketo. So we do have Chili Piper and Salesforce as an integration, but we wanted some other data in Marketo at an earlier stage. Nothing is broken in the process, so that's why we put it as a nice to have. And then the last one, not important, not urgent. It's okay if we don't do those things. We aim for, I think, 70% of goal completion for the quarter. Example here could be scoring optimization. Who uses scoring anyway? So that's an example of an item that could go there. So I hope I answered your question, Lindsay.
I'll pick the next question. I'll pick one that Amy asked, where she started a discussion on, is your Salesforce admin part of the sales ops team? Specifically there for the Alma team, we like the Salesforce admins to be part of the SOPs org because we are organized by technology. It doesn't mean that we only support sales, even though that is a large portion of the role. Then Kim had an interesting follow-up question about whether or not that causes conflict with prioritizing, if we prioritize the sales over marketing or other teams that use Salesforce. A backstory here is that when I was first hired into the Director of Sales Ops role, it was in my job description that I not only support sales, but I also support marketing as well as CX and member success. So I knew that was part of my role and making sure that I have the full picture when I'm prioritizing what to do. As Vero spoke, it's important that we do the road mapping together, and we do this by understanding all the cross-team functions, all their initiatives, where their dependencies on SOPs and MOPs, and then we have to prioritize after that. I think the most important thing that we use for prioritization is that we ultimately all align to the ultimate company goal, which is revenue. So is this project going to drive more contracts? Is this project going to improve churn? And that's how we decide on how we prioritize versus any alignment to whichever team. So we want to align on those leading metrics there.
Awesome. I see a question from Amy in the chat about the buffer council. The buffer council is my next favorite thing. It's a process we implemented recently. We got inspired by Product, who does this kind of exercise. They are hit with way more requests than we are, but it's still a good way to work with those requests from the side. I think that for now, when a buffer request arrives, we surface it by email to the buffer council, which is me, my manager, Carmen, Doris here on the call, and the VP of marketing. And there's some back and forth. If we require clarification, such as impact, what is the trade-off, things like that, we would then get on a call. That didn't happen yet, but it's a great tool to prioritize and be aligned. Maybe Doris has more thoughts here. Doris, what are your thoughts on our new process for buffer?
I think it's a relief. It's just nice to have that there is a process in where we handle these unplanned projects and being able to narrow in and then decide on whether or not we did deprioritize. I think that's so reassuring to have. I know recently we had one that went through the buffer council. We decided to deprioritize, and I think that really helped the team focus a lot better. I'll pick the next question. I'll take, I see one from Catherine Stone. Is MOPs or SOPs responsible for presenting data to leadership? So for us, I mentioned that we are organized by technology, and this process of presenting data is also organized in that way. So Veronica mentioned our monthly business review, and that has metrics across the growth org, whether that's CPL, cost per impressions, and what the whole entire sales funnel. We represent all of these different metrics and share our perspective on what happened in the past month. So the way that we use technology to split that is that we know the sales funnel and all those metrics are in Salesforce. So therefore, SOPs is the one presenting that data to leadership. And then we know that MOPs is the one that has access to Google Analytics and Marketo, and they're able to present the more even top of the funnel metrics on MOPs. And then we collectively work together on summarizing and synthesizing all these different trends together on how they affect the bottom metric, which is the number of new agreements or close-won deals that we have.
Okay, I see there's a follow-up question from Amy in the chat on the buffer council. For now, it's all via email, back and forth. It's more or less voting. It looks like where we get different inputs from different levels. If we prioritize this, deprioritize something else. Can it wait? That's also one of the questions. And so if that cannot be clarified or we are not all aligned on via email, then we would get on a meeting, but it's not something we do recurring. It's as per case basis. And since we implemented the buffer process, we haven't seen that many requests coming in from the side. So maybe this is actually helping the teams think about more strategically what asks to make, when to make those asks. Can it wait? Like if I have a request on September 20th and quarterly planning is starting next week, maybe I should wait until quarterly planning and put my request via that one. That's a bigger chance that can get prioritized. I hope I answered that question. I know there was a question on triage also from Amy, and I'm not sure if you answered that, Doris, because I couldn't hear for a little bit about.
Yeah. Oh, I guess it's a triage call.
Yeah.
What we do, we have these working sessions, and we do go through which tickets that we need to work on, especially when there's codependencies. And those weekly sessions are great not only for triaging and figuring out which ones we're going to work on in the coming week, but also we use this time to actually tackle some of those asks live. And our sessions may run over, but I think it's super productive and more beneficial that way.
Yeah, and I would add that for the quarterly planning. So when I get this massive list of all the things, marketing wants to work on, then I bring that to Doris and we invite, for example, my manager for a more objective point of view on what should we prioritize. So that's the session where we put things in the quadrant. So there could be discussion where I feel something is important for me because I like technology. Maybe I really want to implement this new tool, but then my manager would say, well, actually, this is a nice to have. So we do that live, and that can take, half an hour, but it can also take 2 hours. And we always want to make sure we close that planning before we go back and communicate to the teams where we landed in terms of priorities.
Right. I see a question coming from Rosie. It's how is MOPs involved in sales onboarding? I think Vero can add more to that. But for the sales onboarding, we recently onboarded a sales enablement manager, so they'll be revamping this whole onboarding process. But for sales onboarding, it is mainly focused on the sales technology, sales processes, but also we showcase some of the auxiliary teams so they can meet the different stakeholders that they are interacting with. And that one of that being demand generation and MOPs, and Vero can add more to that.
Yeah, so I recently made a Loom that is specific for sales onboarding, where I talk about marketing ops, what is the data we feed into Salesforce, where is the data coming from, and I think that Loom is part of the onboarding process. I used to meet with the BDRs at least to give a training, for example, if we roll out Marketo Sales Insights or a new tool for referrals to get, their point of view, but also make sure that onboarding is done properly. And I have to say that Doris is my champion. We hear about champions in the organization to help, with marketing ops, but this is the work Doris does for the entire growth organization.
I'm not sure if we have time for another question. We have 30 seconds. I'll cover off that last question or last comment from Amy about having it be hard to get the Salesforce admins to focus on MOPS requests. I think here that resource planning is so key, especially when we get into that annual planning, which initiatives that we work on. That's where we say, like, all these initiatives that whoever one wants to do, these require X amount of resources, and we want to make those requests upfront. If we don't get those requests, if we don't get those headcount requests, and we're not able to deliver on these needs. So then that's where we ask that leadership team and escalate that they need to make a call on whether or not we do prioritize this or not. All right. So thank you so much for listening to our session and for all of the great questions. We love talking about this project, and we hope that you found this session useful. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you in the upcoming sessions.